Welcome to this edition of Mwango Spaces. We have two very able speakers, Spiro Uganda and Spiro Kenya, and they'll tell us a bit more about the EV market, how it's shaping up around Kenya and around Africa as a whole. Kaushik, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit, who you are and what you do, and then I'll come to Raymond after that.
Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you, Mongo Capital, for hosting the spaces with Spiro team. Very excited to be here for our first session on Twitter Spaces, along with my colleague Raymond. By introductions, I'm the CEO of Spiro and have the privilege to be a part of an exciting team to lead a very solid team on ground where we are the largest EV player in Africa. And our vision is to transform the mobility sector and energy storage sector in Africa. And we are putting all our efforts on ground, on working across multiple markets to build the brand Spiro. So excited to be here. By background, I'm an engineer and an MBA. Professional career spans about 25 odd years across multiple industries, of which the last 15 odd years I've been spending in the clean energy sector. So I've been in the LNG sector, I've been in hydrogen briefly, and also happen to have worked in the fossil fuel space and also electric mobility space. So where I have worn multiple hats from policy advocacy all the way to business development roles, and very excited with what Kenya is offering us as a platform to develop Spiro as a trusted brand in the market. Thank you.
Raymond, you can introduce yourself and what you do within Spiro.
Thank you. Once again, thank you, Mwango, for hosting us. My name is Raymond, and I am the Deputy Country Head for Spiro Kenya. And I come from a background of marketing, specifically spanning about 20 years, both on multinationals. These are fast-moving consumer household goods. Just to mention a few is Coca-Cola, Airtel, SportPesa around Kenya, and having grown several brands from entry market onto household names. So basically that's my background. Really excited to also be here with a team of people around Kenya. Excited to also work very closely with Kaushik, who has a wealth of experience in terms of the automotive industry, and to drive the EV agenda in Kenya through Spiro. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond and Kaushik. Our conversation will cover the EV market in Kenya and in Africa and how Spiro is changing all that in that space. So I want to start with Kaushik. Maybe you can give us a high-level view of how Spiro started, your interest in the EV market yourself, and perhaps some high-level numbers on some of the countries that you're operating in across Africa.
Thank you. The Spiro's genesis has been 3 years in making. This is our third year of operations, and what a fantastic ride which Spiro has provided for itself and for customers. Started off in the west of Africa with Benin and Togo in a manner which was to look into the Boda driver segment, the B2B bike taxi segment, Boda segment. And Spiro is a part of the Equitane Group. Just to also lay out the context here, Equitane Group is a conglomerate which close to a significant amount of capital in 15 odd countries of Africa. Within the sustainability vertical of Equitane Group, Spiro is the poster child. We have been growing in Africa over the last 3 years, as I mentioned. Humble start in Benin and Togo, but very quickly the brand has reached out to almost 6 countries now operational. And we have deployed over 18,000 electric motorbikes across these 6 countries, which include Benin, Togo. Nigeria was a recent launch in the last couple of months. We have expanded in Ghana. So about 4 countries in the West and 3 markets, of which are Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda. Obviously, Ghana is new and just seeding the market, but the other 6 markets are at their stages of evolution journey. Kenya has done exceedingly well with over now 1,100 bikes, and Raymond can give the exact numbers, but phenomenal performance by the team on ground, delighting customers across Mombasa and Nairobi. Similarly, we have seen some staggering numbers in Rwanda as well as in Uganda, which gives us confidence. And these are all new markets which we have launched in the past 3 months. And it gives us a lot of confidence that if you get the product market fit, if you really listen into customers' needs, because that's what we are all here for, and understand the main pain points which are around affordable and accessible, or the lack of affordable and accessible mobility, then you got a story around how do you work together as a team to develop solutions which solve their customer needs. And as a result of that, customers keep coming back to you. And innovation is at the heart of Spiro. So we have been driving innovation across multiple vectors. We have a very strong technology team that works on the hardware development, that works on the firmware as well as the software development. We have very strong operations teams who are working to design, develop the energy network that includes battery swapping stations, fast charging stations, home charging solution. So Spiro is the only player in the world, in fact, which offers all the different types of charging solutions, including battery swapping. We've got a very strong country operations team on ground who are dealing with sales, marketing, and operations. So in a sense, in each of these new markets that we enter, we've got a go-to-market plan, a plan to make sure that we stay very close to the voice of the customer and kind of have a good feedback loop in product development, R&D, engineering to bring in best-in-class solutions for the customers.
And what's your experience across the African continent? Is Africa ready for EVs, and how is the infrastructure development around the markets that you operate?
So I think first and foremost, you can view this as glass half full or empty, because Africa, just think about it, 1.4 billion people, population of Africa across 54 countries. And I come from India, which is reasonably same number, 1.4 billion population. So if you look at the two-wheeler sales in India as an example, annually we sell about 20 million units of two-wheelers. And there's a stock of almost 200 million two-wheelers, give or take. When I say stock, I'm talking about the existing ICE bikes. And it's only in the last 6 to 7 years where the electric vehicle revolution has kicked off in India, thanks to our Prime Minister and the federal government's initiatives. But if you just compare like for like between Africa and India, for the same population, the total stock of two-wheelers, ICE vehicle, is roughly around 20 million units. So we're talking 110. And the annual sales of two-wheelers is about roughly 2 million units. So that's also roughly about 1/9 or 1/10. So like for a large continent such as Africa, with the large countries that we have, small, large countries that we have, and very young demographics, which is ushering towards new jobs, development across multiple cities, mobility is a make or break factor for families to thrive, to have income and thrive. If they do not get access to affordable mobility, then they're not able to get included in the society, right? It leads to exclusion rather than inclusion. You can't go to college, you can't get a job. So affordable mobility is, in fact, in my view, is a right to win. It's a right that every citizen should get to get access to education, to get access to jobs, commercial inclusion. Now, if in this time where climate crisis is also unfolding at a very rapid pace, if we do not make affordable mobility, cleaner mobility, then chances are that large swaths of the population will gravitate towards subopt solutions, which means polluting the environment further, and that will have a compounding effect on multiple things, right? Climate crisis is rapidly leading to so many other issues. So therefore, for Spiro, our vision is aligned with what we call SDG goals, Sustainable Development Goals, which means by actually developing affordable and clean mobility, accessible infrastructure, we will be in a position to provide this to mass customers, mass consumers, so that they feel included, and that leads to massive amount of compounding in terms of GDP growth, in terms of quality of life, in terms of multiple other factors. So for us, that is the higher purpose, which drives us, which inspires us to come to work.
I'll come back to you, Kaushik. Let me talk to Raymond a little bit. Raymond, your background is more telecom and more the communication sector and the beverages industry, but then you're attracted to Spiro and what they're doing. Could you tell us a bit about what attracted you to this sector and what you've observed in the period that you've been working with Spiro?
There's something we call a revolution. And if you've clearly heard what Kaushik has said, the opportunity that is before us was an opportunity to, first of all, bring a change in terms of humanity. So number one was for me to make such an impact in terms of every single day, not only to myself, but to the entire humanity. And what really attracted me with the proposition of this is I look back at when we were actually starting off telecommunication in Kenya. And it was more or less the same space, but we were moving from a very analog kind of a system into a more digital. And this is where now mobile telephony was coming into play. So the infrastructure was not there, just the same way right now. EV space is opening up 100 million times much more faster than what we saw telecommunication back then. So in terms of the revolution and to give back to mankind really attracted myself, and I knew I could play a big part in terms of injecting the experience that I've accumulated over all these years to help an industry and specifically to Kenya and grow it much more bigger than we can expect. Number two is in terms of the technology that comes with it. We all are aware in terms of the technological impact and the research and development that Spiro has as a backbone. This, without a fact, gave me that answer that I really wanted, that not only are we going to remain static, but we are going to go even much more higher. And true to this is because in a matter of a very short period of time, we are talking about several kind of models that we are going to deploy in terms of infrastructure, in terms of our swapping models, in terms of the iteration that we have offered to Kenyans. So Spiro posed a very critical answer to me in terms of R&D. And there's a lot of investment, not only on the models to which we take to the market, but also onto people, because it has invested a lot on the people that drives the agenda. Our expansion is quite aggressive and very robust, and we've had tremendous success in all these countries that we tap into. And just so to give you the overview numbers, we have already in Kenya done about 11 months of trading, and we have above 1,300 vehicles on road in these two cities. So those three key points gave me the conviction and the belief that this is indeed the industry that actually changes not only human beings, but the population at large.
Kaushik, maybe you can pitch what are Spiro's key products that you're offering to consumers, and what's the uptake been so far, and where do you develop some of the products that you're shipping to clients?
We are a vertically integrated company, which basically means a vision is that we drive synergies across the entire automotive value chain, starting from the upstream, which is assembly of the motorbikes and batteries. One has to underscore the point that you can't just build ecosystem just by shipping products from one part of the world and deploying them in Africa. If you have to develop the ecosystem in Africa, you really need to look at a very long end of the curve and understand that you have to stay west, build this market, and you have to develop capabilities, local capabilities, which ensure that there is sustainable business models which one can develop. So Spiro is very focused in developing the local capabilities in Africa. Africa is rich in natural resources, and the philosophy our parent group, Equitain, as well as Rise Group, which has done phenomenal work in Africa, is to transform the livelihoods of people in Africa by creating local jobs, by providing local value addition, high value addition in the continent, and rather than just trading from one part of the world to another part of the world and not letting the value add soak in, right? So Spiro's philosophy is aligned with that of our parent group. And therefore, we have taken baby steps initially, but now we are fast tracking what I would say, solidifying the foundation, which is how do we build the capabilities around manufacturing? And so Kenya is the flagship manufacturing assembly facility, which we have kicked off in Spiro. This is our first global assembly line, which is cranking vehicles today. We will continue to build on this and create an ecosystem of partners who are strategic partners who will come and build this EV ecosystem out of Kenya, which feeds into multiple other countries in East Africa. Fantastic talent. So there's a lot of capability building around the manufacturing side of it. In our engineering and R&D, we have focused a lot in the last couple of years. Very pleased to share that Spiro has been filing a lot of patents across multiple vectors in the technology sphere. So we have in fact developed our own battery pack, our proprietary BMS is in the pack. So we will start doing technology transfer in Africa so that we can assemble the batteries also locally. And then, of course, today we are just starting with two-wheeler motorbikes. We have deployed about 18,000, as I mentioned. But the plan is really to transform the industry, which is looking at the total number of ICE bikes which are available today in the market, which people are using. And also some of the non-users, people who are just using probably matatus or just walking and they don't have access to affordable motorbike. Our goal is to make sure that we try and see how we can make this product even more affordable so that the common man can use this two-wheeler motorbikes. We are also looking into multiple other form factors, which basically means three-wheelers and four-wheelers in future. As I said at the onset of the call, we not only offer battery swapping, but also fast charging and home charging. That's the path forward, that for three-wheelers and four-wheelers, whether those are small buses or cars, we'll be in a position to divert that traffic towards fast charging destinations. Again, and also on the technology side, we've launched our first ride-hailing app. Similar to what Uber does, what Bolt does, we've launched it in Kenya. So Kenya has actually seen innovation getting not only in small R&D labs, but actually we are commercializing the innovation out of Kenya. Very high digital penetration, fantastic talent which is available. So we are trying to leverage as much as we can to build Kenya as a sort of a very powerful hub for Spiro.
On the issue of being vertically integrated, isn't that like a bit capital intensive? And then are you vertically integrated in each market, or you're leveraging the advantages that you find in each market to be able to perhaps produce one thing here and one thing on the other side? What's your strategy around that? I just wanted to understand a little better.
It's very early days, yeah. So you have to understand that today Africa is at very early stages, nascent stages in terms of even the infrastructure development. If you have to build out a vehicle, especially an electric vehicle, there's a significant proportion of electronics that go into an electric vehicle. It won't happen that across different parts of Africa, we will have distributed supply chains at the onset. Yes, in the long run, we will obviously have probably some clustering, which is in East Africa, maybe we'll do a few parts, components with our suppliers. In West, it could be some mix of parts and components. But please also understand that shipment and logistics also is quite expensive. So you can't just move parts and components from one part to another. Africa is so big, the landscape is complex. So therefore, one will have to look at fit for purpose, pragmatic approach to do distributed supply chains, distributed manufacturing. But at the same time, you really need to see where's the demand. Everything starts with demand, right? So how do you create that demand and then create the supply envelopes to make sure you're, again, bringing costs down and driving more economies of scale? So we will have to try out, we will have to figure out multiple iterations. At this point, what I can tell you is our first assembly line, our first manufacturing facility is something that we were very proud of. And what we will do is try and make sure that we have a very strong synergy between upstream manufacturing to downstream energy network deployment. There are colleagues who are working round the clock in developing that infrastructure on ground, and that is very important. And then we are also working to develop a partnership ecosystem, because not everything can be done by Spiro. This is a revolution that we need to trigger. So we need partners from different parts of the industry to come and join hands. And that's why colleagues like Raymond, who have come from different parts of the industry, whether it's FMCG or telecom, there are these alliances and partnerships, which are fluid partnerships, right? But at the same time, each partner brings a lot of value to the table. They may not be from EV, but they bring some aspects around customer lifetime management, or somebody brings real estate. So you got to build this ecosystem together. So without alliances and partnerships, it becomes almost impossible to build this ecosystem.
Raymond, perhaps you can give us a bit of more perspective on some of the partners that you work with in Kenya and how the experience has been in terms of building the ecosystem in Kenya from Spiro Kenya's perspective.
Yeah. Thanks. Good question. So as we continue building, we have so many partners on the table. And I'll put one simple perspective. There's the first partner, who is the Kenyan person himself, the Kenyan people. So we take really good consideration in terms of how we want to revolutionize these people in terms of understanding the customer. So we've taken a lot of time in terms of understanding who our customer is. More so I'll be jealously guarding in terms of Kenya, but this is not only for Kenya. In all the markets to which Spiro lays its footprint, the first thing is to really understand what are the customer traits so that we can drive demand upwards. Number two is the financial institutions. There are so many players out there who are willing and more than ready to give facilities and lower barriers of entry, because we all understand there was a misconception about it that getting an EV would have been almost 3 times more expensive. So we sat around the table with so many financial institutions, and some of them we are still talking to them. We are extending the discussions with them to bring everybody on board. Why is this important? It's because we want to lower the entry barriers and to make it so affordable for this customer whom we've really now understood what they really want. And the common story that they're giving us is they will want a very affordable but a product of very high quality. So it all pegs back to our R&D in terms of understanding this. Number 3 is the publics to which we come into contact with. As Spiro Kenya, we are already full members of the Electric Mobility Association of Kenya, because these are key stakeholders in terms of driving policy issues, in terms of driving what as EV players will want to shape the destiny of this particular industry. That is already done. And also the other publics, the central government, the county government, all the key ministerial stakeholders. As Spiro, we've brought everybody on the table and we are talking to all these people so that we can clearly understand. And we are very granular in terms of how we articulate our issues, all the way to the Boda Association of Kenya, because we do appreciate that 92% of the two-wheelers in terms of the latest numbers of registrations are done through. So we have this key stakeholder called BAK, whom we have done several tie-ups with. So these are some of the key stakeholders to which we are rotating around the table, having a discussion, driving initiatives through them so that we can become more successful.
Thank you, Raymond. And to you, Kaushik, can you speak to the unit economics perhaps in terms of the EV bike versus the ICE bike, the fuel-powered one, and in terms of why you think the future lies in EV going forward?
It goes back to the basic, which is today, most of the emerging markets with young population, every market, every country in Africa is young, is moving on the go, and fuel is imported. So it's a double whammy for the taxpayer because you're importing fuel, paying dollars, and that has an impact on your currency. At the same time, the secondary issues such as and I've been in fossil fuels, I've seen some parts of it. So I can tell you that the impact of carcinogens through harmful emissions is quite high, right? So it has health effects. So primary and secondary healthcare distribution, which most of the emerging markets, including those of India, they're not state subsidized. So essentially hits the taxpayer in two ways, double whammy. So therefore, switch to the EV or switch to cleaner fuels is not a choice. It is not a choice. It has to happen. And governments across the world are thinking as scratching their heads to see how best can we do this transition in the quickest possible time. Some governments are taking the lead in terms of incentives, like India. I can definitely say with certainty that the Indian policy around EV subsidies and both on the consumer demand side as well as on the supply side, it has been phenomenal. It's being recognized as one of the best policies. So policy structuring and policy design becomes very important. And in a long-term sustainable manner, this is very important. Now, coming to TCO or unit economics. See, at the end of the day, fuel prices are only going to rise going forward. Governments are going to wean off subsidies. So ongoing basis for a consumer, if he's using a combustion engine, he has to pay more in terms of the running cost. Plus, combustion engine bike and ICE bike will have higher maintenance issues, right? Because of the oil change and so many other moving parts. In an EV, electric vehicle, has fewer parts compared to an ICE bike. By nature of the mechanical design itself, since you have fewer parts, there is less wear and tear in an EV compared to an ICE. Therefore, your maintenance costs are also a fraction, maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of a ICE bike. So if you combine maintenance costs along with fuel costs, broadly your running costs are at least around 30% cheaper than 30 to 35% cheaper than gasoline powered bike. Now, having said that, some of the countries in Africa, you will find that the government gives subsidies to fossil fuels and therefore the pricing per liter of a fossil fuel is lower. So therefore the savings may not be as high as 30% in some markets, but it's still cheaper by a fraction of around 10-15%. Now, upfront cost of the bike. This is where most of the electric bikes are. If you scan the market, you'll see that they are expensive compared to a combustion engine bike. And that's primarily because combustion engine bike makers, they have been making ICE bikes for the last 50 odd years. So you've paid off, most of your equipment has been amortized. So you can actually square off and bring these prices to much lower levels. The competition, therefore, is how do you, or the challenge for the EV industry broadly, is how do you work to get the upfront costs of the bike lower than that of an ICE bike. For Spiro, we have been working on this quite hard in terms of how do we get a good product lower than an ICE bike. And I think we have made good progress. The outcomes are now hitting the market. Our products are being liked by customers, asset financiers like our product. If you try out the new Econ bike of Spiro, you will see what I'm talking about. These are very cost competitive compared to an ICE bike, and on a fuel cost to, let's say, running cost of a EV Spiro Econ bike, I can tell you that will be at least 20 to 25% cheaper, for example, in a market like Kenya. Therefore, the unit economics stacks up in favor of an EV.
Could you tell us a bit more about the range for one battery and how long does it take to charge usually?
Yeah, so typically the battery range, see, just as a way, again, I'll give you a simple example. When you're driving a gas bike, when you throttle real hard, when you accelerate, continue to accelerate and drive at top speed, you're actually consume more energy and that therefore the mileage drops. So range of the battery is very similar to the driving behavior. If you're having consistent low to moderate speed, then obviously the range will be longer and driving behavior has a high correlation to the energy consumed from the battery. Spiro's battery can last anywhere between 75 to 80 kilometers in terms of driving range. That's why we offer battery swapping solution, which is within a minute or max couple of minutes. It's like a battery ATM. Just so that you go to ATM to take your cash, you go to a Spiro battery swap station, you can swap your battery. And along with that, now we are deploying fast chargers in Kenya. So wherever you want to go and do a quick fast charge in 15 to 20 minutes, you can charge up 30% of your battery. And then we are also giving home charging kits to customers. So people who have access to home charging, they can just go and charge their batteries through the night. So at any given point in time, we want to make sure that customer has very high peace of mind, doesn't need to worry about range anxiety.
And I do remember that in testing out an EV, one of the biggest issues that people have is, of course, range anxiety. You do not want, if you're a border driver, taking someone from point to point, and then you have to worry about, okay, will I reach there with the current battery charge and all? I guess you also provide a way for someone to monitor the usage and consumption. So at some point, they're able to pop into the next stop and then be able to change their battery as quickly as possible and continue on the ride.
That's right. That's right. We have developed our own maps. So we don't use Google Maps, we use Spiro Maps. Increasingly, you will see that maps will have the energy network footprint number of swap stations. Any border rider, or even for that matter, if you're a normal consumer, you'll be able to actually see where the swap stations are, where the fast chargers are, and you will increasingly see more and more action happening on Spiro Maps. Very interesting product that we have launched.
Very interesting. Raymond, the absolute cost for EVs, the two-wheeler EVs, can be quite high at some point. You also do have some financing solutions. What are some of the financing solutions that you're providing to customers to be able to handle that high upfront cost that is needed? What's the price range here that you're talking about?
So one of the key things that we noticed, and this I want to quickly remind all the listeners, is we wanted to understand the customer traits. When you had posed a question, what are the key things that we usually look into? And affordability to us, it's a real pillar that we want to entrench ourselves onto. So one of the financing option is we spoke to all the industry leaders who initially had done the industry through the ICE bikes. So these are several asset financing who are accepting a particular percentage in terms of deposit, and they will pay off the remaining balance between 18 to 24 months. And you will find that once we started being commercially live in Kenya, Spiro was and is still offering the best and most aggressive deposit through all these leading asset financing. Why am I saying it's quite aggressive? Is because we pushed the bar extremely high to have very competitive deposit, because the border industry, again, or the common Kenyan who will want to own this bike could only manage a particular percentage, which was extremely high, even if you matched yourself against an internal combustion engine bike. So we got a very aggressive deposit or down payment. And specifically to be clear, like for Watu, the deposit has remained at Kenya shillings 20,000, which you will find is quite aggressive against, say, an ICE bike, which will demand a much more higher deposit for anybody. So the second point was to determine in terms of the daily rentals between the 18 and 24 months, to which I have alluded, is we also wanted a design. And that's why we brought everybody on the table to have this very sweet deal, and something that can not only appeal to Spiro, but appeal to the asset financiers who are going to keep quite low rate of default, because we wanted many bikes to be on road. You have clearly heard from Kaushik in terms of our swapping model, because we wanted every single time the customer experience to be top notch, the customer delight to be good, so that we can get as many referrals as possible through having as many bikes as possible on road and people defaulting less. So the daily rentals or the daily repayment was also key for us in terms of shaping it so that it can be more affordable and pegging it back to how competitive it is or how affordable it is in terms of the 20 to 25% in terms of the maintenance cost. This ultimately led us to having a value proposition that is so appealing in terms of when we are dealing with these asset financiers. So maybe just to add on that is we are also now having a discussion with commercial banks so that we can also get them onto this space. Remember, these are people who ordinarily would have been afraid of this particular big chunk of industry because of it being unregulated and what have you. But we are talking to also commercial banks who are also coming onto the space right now to ensure that they also offer the asset financing to this huge opportunity.
Kaushik, in operating across the markets that you're operating in, what are some of the things that you've noted in the various markets in terms of regulations, in terms of how the locals are taking up the uptake on EVs and the enthusiasm around that from government, from the customer that you're dealing with and all?
I think it's important given the fact that some of the countries internationally have taken the lead in electrification of the transportation sector. It's important for African policymakers to seek best-in-class policies which are already there and build on it, or I would say lift and shift. A classic case would be, as I said, from the Asia region. China has done some fantastic work in terms of the infrastructure development. There are today roughly about 8 million DC fast chargers in China. 8 million. About 45 million slow charging points to support a population of about 1.35 billion. In fact, China has, as we all know, has accelerated a lot of its manufacturing footprint, which has allowed costs to fall down rapidly, both for battery as well as for different types of vehicles. Today, an entry level electric vehicle in China is probably at $5,000 to $6,000, which is fantastic. Now, there are other policies which other Asian economies and even economy like India has showcased, which is how do we build customer demand by ensuring there is a policy called FAME 3, FAME 2 policy and FAME 1 policy, which is essentially triggering demand, customer demand by giving incentives directly to the customer. And this incentive is linked to the capacity of the battery pack. So this incentive program has almost been given for almost a period of 7-8 years, which has led to almost double-digit adoption rates in some of the tier 1 cities of India. About 10 to 15% of two-wheeler sales today in India are happening in the EV space. Similarly, to support demand, the Indian government has fostered incentives to promote more local manufacturing. In the years of early 2000, India had lagged behind China in terms of manufacturing electronics. And so the whole semiconductor to electronics value chain was missing in India. Things have started looking up. So there's a lot of incentives which Indian government is giving to promote manufacturing. Now, one could argue that it costs a lot of money for the taxpayer, but it goes back to my previous point. In any case, if you're importing fuels in the market, if you're importing fossil fuels in the market, you are actually paying through top dollars and it impacts your currency. So the sooner you start putting money or investing money in promoting electrification, in promoting cleaner transportation, it will really help reduce the subsidy bill. So that's one part of the regulatory aspect. The second is regulations around safety standards are extremely important, especially battery safety, because in battery safety, there is a need to increase the level of safety standards. Otherwise, anybody, any kind of cheap maker of cell can supply products and that leads to battery fires. Internationally, there are international safety standards on battery pack, which is UL 2271 and 2272. So these international standards on battery safety is extremely important. And to do this, companies have to invest in cell testing and making sure that the pack level, your BMS has gone through enough and more tests around thermal propagation systems. You have a very strong safety lock in place in case there is for heat dissipation, for various other things, so that there are no electrical shocks. So these safety standards are extremely important. Again, in this case, both China, India, Indonesia have taken the lead. Singapore has taken the lead in terms of aligning with international standards. So it's a great opportunity for African policy makers, the countries of Africa. They have to look at what's going around in the market in terms of international standards and be able to elevate that, make it a mandate to make sure that players who are launching products in these countries adhere to these standards. And then the third thing is, how do you create mandates such that in a few years' time, there won't be any ICE two-wheeler sales in the country? These mandates also help because it then leads to customers making the right choices as well. So a combination of these levers will help in driving more adoption levels.
We're now winding up the conversation, so I'll give Raymond to perhaps speak a little bit about the manufacturing plant that you're seeking to set up in Kenya. Definitely just give us your vision around the Kenyan space, and then Kaushik can give us the global perspective, or at least what's the vision for Spiro going forward.
Thank you. So our world-class manufacturing facility is located at Katko Complex. And just as maybe what Kaushik has just said, in terms of safety, we have invested top dollar in terms of ensuring that safety forms part of it. Remember, it's our first. So this goes to show how important Kenya is, both to the Spiro business, to our Equitan group, and for us to drive the EV agenda here in Kenya. So it's the first, so a lot is expected because of the huge opportunity that is before us. If I may just remind you that there are about 2 million ICE bikes in Kenya, and the number of EVs is growing each year. How we look at Kenya is a very placed country in terms of, one, both manufacturing, two, in terms of the capacity that it can offer across the East African region. And that's why Spiro decided to set up the manufacturing plant here in Kenya. Number three is what we've just spoke in terms of the government offering the policies. We know how important it is for government to draft and support the industry. And we have seen this, and not only for Spiro, but for all the other players, that we need to come together and shape this particular industry. So for Kenya, we look at it as shining light, and it needs to come out and set the pace. And the numbers will actually prove it in terms of how we penetrate to all these other cities, not only to the main key cities in Kenya, but across all the cities. Number four is there is a very vibrant and robust financial industry that can actually plug onto this space and support this industry and grow it tenfold. And that's the space to which Kenya is shaping itself up, and also for its brilliant people, because it has the capacity and the resource from different industries to come together and support this industry and make Spiro Kenya as the perfect example on how to grow this particular industry.
Thank you, Raymond. And once again, where can people find the manufacturing plant for those who are seeking perhaps to check you guys out?
So we are located at the Katko Complex. Katko Complex is about 250 meters from the SGR at Lolongo. So that's where we are located for our manufacturing plant. It's a world-class facility run by Kenyan men and women who come from different backgrounds to champion this noble cause.
Thank you. Seems like we lost Kaushik. Raymond, maybe you can give us your closing thoughts in that regard.
I am super excited in what I am doing right now. And one thing I will tell all the listeners here is this industry, we are yet to even scratch the bare surface. I do believe it is a good step into the right direction. If I compare right now with the kind of adoption that we have been having for the last 11 months that we have traded in Kenya commercially, I am more than convinced that we are just getting started. Also is the amount of capacity building involved by different people who can come and contribute towards this particular sector. It can only get better because the technology is rapidly changing every single time. So it gives a very fertile ground for someone to come and learn. And that's why as Spiro, again, we have over-invested on the graduate trainee program in terms of adopting and building capacity well in advance to ensure that we get constant supply, not only to Spiro, but even to the whole industry. So we are preparing a whole ecosystem. And in terms of driving the EV agenda, we are convinced that based on this pillar of affordability and putting in all the stakeholders together, we are going to create this revolution that we've always spoken about, but it's a good revolution. It's a revolution that is going to help mankind at the end of the road. So my parting shot is this is the industry where, just like Lance Armstrong, just like the guys who went to the moon, we stand at the brink of doing something great for mankind. So let's join hands and let's do something great for mankind.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, team from Spiro, for joining us on Mwango Spaces today. We really appreciate that you took the time to be here. Everyone in the audience, we also appreciate the time that you took to listen in on this conversation. We want to be part of this revolution around EVs in Kenya's transport sector. So we hope this is the beginning of a conversation around transforming Kenya in that regard. Check out their website and do check out their plans where they've invited you to. Please join them in the revolution.